My name is Max, and I'm a high school sophomore living in Denver. It was supposed to be a normal sleepover, just me and my friends hanging out, playing video games, and eating junk food. But things took a turn when someone, probably Jake, suggested we check out the old abandoned house a few blocks away. At first, everyone hesitated. We had all heard stories about the place. Some kids said it was haunted, others claimed weird things happened there, but no one really knew for sure. But being teenagers, our curiosity got the better of us, and before I knew it, we were sneaking out into the cool night. The house loomed over us as we approached, its windows dark and broken. The front door creaked as we pushed it open, and the air inside was stale and thick with dust. We walked in, our footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The floorboards creaked under our weight, and the only light came from our flashlights, cutting through the darkness. We started exploring, laughing nervously, trying to shake off the unease that hung over us. The place was full of old furniture covered in sheets, like something out of a horror movie. We went from room to room, finding nothing but old, forgotten items, until we stumbled upon a room in the back. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, strange markings covered the walls. In the center of the room was a makeshift altar, with candles burned down to their stubs and odd symbols drawn all around it. We stood frozen, staring at the scene in front of us, trying to make sense of it. Then, we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy and deliberate, coming from upstairs. My heart started pounding, and I saw the fear in my friend's eyes. We thought it might be a homeless person or maybe someone just squatting in the house. We didn't want to stick around to find out. We turned to leave quietly, but the door slammed shut behind us with a force that shook the walls. Panic set in. We tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Then we saw him, a man standing in the doorway, holding a knife. His eyes were wild, and he had a crazed smile on his face. "You've interrupted my ritual," he said, his voice low and menacing. He started moving toward us, and I could feel the air grow colder. The room seemed to close in around us, and I thought we were done for. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let this happen. As he got closer, I grabbed a broken chair leg from the floor and swung it as hard as I could. I hit him in the arm, knocking the knife out of his hand. He yelled in pain, and that was our chance. We bolted for the door, and somehow it opened this time. We ran like our lives depended on it, and they did. We didn't stop running until we were back at my house. We called the police, who arrived quickly and arrested the man. He was some drifter who had been living in the abandoned house, performing strange rituals. Even though we were safe, the experience stuck with me. I started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced the man was still after me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in that room, the fear that gripped me. Now I can't walk past that house without feeling a chill run down my spine. What was supposed to be a fun sleepover turned into something I'll never forget, and something I wish I could. My name is Liam, and I'll never forget the night I stayed over at Jack's house. Jack and I had been best friends since elementary school, and when he invited me for a sleepover while his parents were out of town, I jumped at the chance. We lived in Seattle, and Jack's house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happened, or so I thought. We spent the evening playing video games and eating snacks, just like any other sleepover. It was late, probably around midnight, when I first heard it. A faint noise, like something moving, coming from the basement. I paused the game and looked at Jack, but he just shrugged it off. "It's probably just the old furnace," he said, brushing it off. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The noise kept nagging at me, like an itch I couldn't scratch. "Come on, let's go check it out," I finally said. Jack was reluctant, but I insisted. He grabbed a flashlight, and we headed down the creaky stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was cluttered with old boxes and furniture covered in dust. But the noise was clearer now, a sort of mechanical whirring, like something running. We followed the sound to a far corner of the basement, where a large cabinet stood against the wall. Jack pulled the door open, revealing a hidden room. My stomach dropped. Inside, there were monitors and surveillance equipment, wires snaking across the floor, and tapes neatly stacked on shelves. Each tape was labeled with a date and a name, names I recognized. Neighborhood kids, including Jack. Jack stared in disbelief, his face pale as a sheet. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. The reality of what we were seeing hit us like a punch to the gut. This was no misunderstanding. Someone had been secretly recording kids in the neighborhood, including us. We stood there, frozen, until we heard the front door open upstairs. Jack's dad was home. Panic surged through me, but Jack just looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "We have to confront him," Jack said, though his voice trembled. I didn't want to, but I knew we couldn't just walk away from this. We went back upstairs, our feet like lead as we moved toward the kitchen, where his dad was unpacking groceries like nothing was wrong. Jack didn't waste any time. "Dad, what the hell is in the basement?" His dad's face changed in an instant. The calm, friendly expression we knew was replaced with something cold, calculating. "It's nothing, Jack," he said, trying to sound casual. But there was an edge to his voice. "Just some old security stuff." But we knew better. "This isn't security," I said, my voice shaky. "You've been recording us, recording kids." He looked at us, and for a moment, I thought he was going to deny it. But then his face twisted into a smile that sent chills down my spine. "It's not what you think," he said. "You've got it all wrong." But we knew we didn't. Jack's hands were shaking, but he grabbed the phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, and I saw the fear flash across his dad's face. He didn't try to stop us, just stood there, staring as Jack made the call. The police came quickly, and they took his dad away. I'll never forget the look on Jack's face as they led him out in handcuffs. It was a mix of disbelief, anger, and betrayal. After that night, nothing was the same. Jack couldn't stay in that house, and our friendship was never quite the same either. I think we both lost something that night. Innocence, trust, maybe even a bit of ourselves. The kind of thing you can't ever get back. I'm Lucas, and this story still makes my skin crawl. It was just a regular sleepover at my best friend Chris's house in Dallas. We were playing video games, eating chips, and laughing about stupid stuff like always. But then Chris brought up something that wiped the smile right off my face. "Mark's been acting weird," Chris said, lowering his voice. "He keeps the garage locked all the time. Won't let anyone in." Mark was Chris's new stepdad, and I'd always thought he was kind of off, but this was different. Chris and I exchanged a look, and before I knew it, we were sneaking downstairs while Mark was out. The garage door was surprisingly easy to open with a bobby pin Chris found in his sister's room. As soon as we stepped inside, the air felt different, thicker, colder. The garage was packed with tools, boxes, and an old car, but it was what we found behind a large shelf that made my heart race. There was a small, hidden room, barely big enough for the two of us to fit inside. The walls were covered in photos, disturbing crime scene photos. Blood, bodies, faces twisted in pain. My stomach turned as I recognized some of the names scrawled on a list pinned to the wall. These were people from the news, people who were missing. Chris's eyes were wide, and I could see the fear in them. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Before I could answer, we heard the sound of Mark's car pulling into the driveway. Panic set in. We scrambled to get out, knocking over a box in our haste. The car door slammed outside. We barely made it back into the house, hearts pounding, adrenaline pumping. We ran to Chris's older sister, Emma, who was in her room, and spilled everything. At first, she didn't believe us, but one look at our faces, and she knew something was wrong. She called the police, her hands shaking. The police came and arrested Mark that night. It turned out he was a serial killer, hiding right in plain sight. Chris and I had been so close to danger, closer than I ever want to be again. I still have nightmares about that night, and Chris, I'm not sure he'll ever really be the same. He lost more than just a stepfather that night. He lost the sense of safety in his own home. And that's something you can never get back.